Hey, everybody, and welcome to Ben and Nate's Questions That We Ask People on the Internet. I am one half of your co-host, Nate Fay, residing in New England. I've been a licensed massage therapist for 18 years, as well as a master myoskeletal therapist. And when I'm not in my practice up here in Enfield, Connecticut, I'm on the road presenting for Eric Dalton and myoskeletal alignment techniques.
And hey everybody, I'm the other half, Ben Stone. I live in Lincoln, Nebraska. Been a massage therapist for 20 plus years, and I like asking people questions on the internet, and Nate is one of the recipient of those questions. So how you doing, Nate?
I'm doing good, buddy. I'm rested, I'm rejuvenated, and I'm excited to be with you tonight for episode 18.
Episode 18. Man, it's just gone so fast. I remember way back when we were so young. Episode 1. You remember that?
I do. We didn't have microphones. We didn't have a show title. And look at us now.
I mean, we almost have a sponsor.
I heard that Massage Periodicals and CryoFreeze is on almost, we're this close to signing with them.
Yep.
You know, there's a couple of YouTube guys, and this is for real. They call themselves the most famous physical therapists on the internet.
Brad and
I'm sure
Tom.
Brad and Tom, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think
if they were the most famous, we would know their names. Brad and Bob. Brad and Bob.
Yes. See, you do know their names.
Yes.
I think we're on our way to becoming the most famous massage therapists on Apple Podcasts.
You know, that could be if we were to change our names, let's change our names to the most famous massage therapists on the internet.
All right, look for that change.
Well, hey, Nate, I want to ask you a question. You know, I'm full of questions because that's the name of the show. But tell me something good that's happened to you in the last week, because I think I heard something. You told us something last episode about where you were going to be. Tell us about that.
I attended what's called the M3 Festival. We drove down to right outside of Baltimore, Maryland, Columbia, Maryland. And it's a festival that's been going on for 15 years. And I've been wanting to attend for 15 years. So this was kind of a bucket list thing. And it's just a 2-day music festival, a celebration, if you will, of the bands that sort of made their way into LA, glam metal and hard rock, you know, the hair bands, the makeup scene, that kind of thing. And we just had 2 great days of seeing everybody from Rat to Quiet Riot to Faster Pussycat. We saw Bret Michaels, Twisted Sister, Dee Snider, Night Ranger, and the list goes on. Yeah,
that sounds so fun.
And it was cool. You know, first of all, it was just cool to be surrounded by, you know, like-minded people, letting loose. People wore, you know, kind of dressed the part. I did too, right? I did too. And we'll show those pictures right here.
Look us up on YouTube to see Nate's pictures.
What was pretty interesting to me, outside of reliving my youth, I never really stopped listening to a lot of these bands anyway. I still listen to many of them on a regular basis. And it was cool to see a lot of these, you know, mostly guys that are aging, right? It's kind of like a weird thing to see guys like Stephen Pearcy at 67 years old, and the singer of Night Ranger, 70 years old, singer for Y&T, 71 years old. And I think what was impressive to me is not only did they all look amazing, like not only in great physical shape, but sounded, I mean, just as good as they did 40 plus years ago. And that's the part that I thought was cool.
That's fantastic. So tell me, was there a favorite act or something that stood out to you over the weekend?
Oh man, every act was a little bit different. Sunday, the whole day of Sunday, every band that came on stage every band was hitting grand slams that day. And 2 of the bands, Faster Pussycat and Pretty Boy Floyd, that are sort of they were like that era of like Rainbow Room, LA, early 80s glam band, you know, like sleaze rock, if you will. And I just love the fact that they just put it on like they did 40 years ago. Like I just pictured myself, you know, in Hollywood, California, listening to these guys. So they were cool. The other standout was a band called Y&T, and they've been around for 50 years. This was their 50th anniversary. And most people might not remember them, but some of their hits were Summertime Girls. That was their big one, and Don't Stop Running. And Dave Menketti, that runs that band, the front guy, his voice and guitar playing, it's like he just came out and gave every band up there a clinic. And that was like really cool to see. And then Bret Michaels, it was cool to see Bret Michaels, right? Like he's like a legend and from that era, and hear all those songs. And Dee Snider, right? Dee Snider came out and sang I Want to Rock and We're Not Going to Take It. So it was just like really just pretty cool. It gives me hope, Ben. It gives me hope that you and I are going to be in our 70s and still doing this and look as good as we do now.
Rock and massage in our 70s. I'm ready. I'm ready.
I'm ready, baby.
Yeah.
How about you? Tell me something good. How was your week?
Oh man. Well, it hasn't been that long since we got together and recorded our last episode, but in that short amount of time, I got to hang out at our we had the Lincoln Marathon happened over the weekend, and I got to hang out with some of my massage people that were working post marathon, post event type work, and that was cool to see that going on.
And I bet all the athletes enjoyed that massage tent afterwards.
Yeah, and it's funny, you see the cool thing about, I don't know if you've ever worked a massage or a marathon event, but the cool thing is everyone has a story behind why they're running. And I talked to a couple of the athletes there, and I'm running in memory of so and so, or I'm from New York and I'm running a marathon in every state, and just to hear all the stories, it's really cool.
You're never going to catch me running a marathon, and that's okay too.
I mean, if someone's chasing me, then I'm going to be running, but beyond that, no.
I don't even think I'm going to run if someone's chasing me. So listen, buddy, I'm excited. You're excited. It's episode 18. We're creeping our way up to another anniversary of episode 20, which we'll talk about later. And we have a question that we asked on the internet this week.
We have a question we asked on the internet because we ask questions. And how about I just read it off to everybody?
I'm ready to hear it. What was our question this week?
Cool. It reads off as this. In evaluating and working with a client, does posture matter? Is our perception of bad posture relevant, or vice versa? Based off your answer, how do you think the conversation on posture has changed, if at all? So, I always like to ask you the question why you decided to ask this question, but I do want to mention something. I was talking to my general practitioner, my doctor, and he said, Ben, I suspect that you have bad posture when you're working. And I was like, really? Why is that? And he said, just call it a hunch.
Man, I got serious for a minute. I thought you were going to
I sucked you into that one, didn't I?
You did. I kind of, you saw my posture change, didn't you? So if you're watching this on Zoom, I kind of sat up straight and I got really kind of leaned in a little bit.
Yeah, the dog ear, like, huh?
I had a moment. I had a postural moment. That's what you were about to tell me.
I love it. So, I got to throw in a good joke when I can here and there. But back to the question, what was your thinking behind wanting to ask this question, Nate?
Well, it's like everything. I think it's kind of like running the theme of our last several episodes of the stories that we were taught 20 years ago, right? The things we were taught 20 years ago, what the current story is and the conversations are, and where this is going to go. And posture is just one of those things that, as I like to say, was one of these things that in the past 5 to 8 years that took a beating, right? All of a sudden it was like all these things like in the manual therapy world that were quote unquote taking a beating in terms of our language and how we spoke to patients and how we thought about these things. And I just wanted to re-explore this conversation tonight with you and for our amazing listeners on what posture is possibly all about.
And we did get some good feedback about posture because we asked these questions on the internet, and we love it when people share their thoughts about our questions. That way we can talk about them on the show. And we'll probably get to some of those later, but why don't you give me some of your initial thoughts and where you want to go, where you want to take this conversation?
How about we define posture first? What's the definition, the Oxford or Merriam-Webster, I think that was the name. Whatever the case is, what's the definition of posture? So how is posture defined? Posture is defined as how somebody holds their body. right? When standing or sitting. It could be a particular way of dealing with or considering something. It could be an approach and it could be an attitude, much like I did earlier, right? When you spoke to me and I kind of changed my movement a little bit. It could be looked at as a way that somebody, behaves, which is possibly a motion to either, show anger, show sadness, lead somebody on, misbehave. So that's kind of the definition, the dictionary definition.
I like that because, we have a posture is, a general term for how we hold ourselves, but then we have different ways to define posture, like someone's point of view, someone's opinion. I have this posture on this thing, so we could take it away from body work, but I think we'll probably steer
Yeah.
more toward the body work realm. I think of posture, and one of the things that comes to mind is those, I'm going to call it a poster, and it has the ideal posture of someone sitting where you have your elbows bent at 90 degrees, your hips are bent at 90 degrees, your legs, your knees are bent at 90 degrees, the ergonomically correct posture. That comes to mind when I think of what is posture.
And can you imagine sitting that way for 8 hours? I mean, I think that would probably be impossible.
How many times have you had someone show up to your office and tell you, well, my posture at work is bad? I don't know if it's too soon to drop that one, but
We can come back into that, but right, so that was going to be part of my conversation tonight is from the client's point of view. But let's
yeah.
ease into this a little bit more.
Yeah.
Let's go into the pond a little bit with this. Bringing it back to the massage world and manual therapy world with what we do. What is your vision, right? Or maybe what's the general vision of what we picture? What are some of the things pointed out in the body, our perception of what bad posture would be? What would you picture if I said, "Hey Ben, picture a person with bad posture and describe that to me"?
Well, I used to use a little story about Sally sits up straight versus Sammy slouches a lot. So Sally sits up straight. She has perfect ergonomic position. She doesn't have head forward posture. She has everything, at 90-degree right angles. Her wrists are at the right angles when she's at her computer. And then Sammy slouches a lot. He is slumped over at his desk. Everything is just no right angles. It's all just spewed all over the place, and he just spewed out and just sloppy. And so that would be not necessarily my definition of bad posture, but one of the definitions of bad posture. What say you?
Yeah, along those lines, I think we sometimes picture the rounded shoulders, right? The hunched back, like in your dad joke earlier, possibly like the head forward posture. If we're considering the upper body, if we're considering the lower body, maybe we're picturing the butt sticking way out, or maybe like really forward, and maybe the feet maybe turned out like a duck kind of walk. So that would be kind of the pictures that we put in our practices, right? In the picture of what that might be.
How would this bad posture affect us? Or what are some of the ways that people claim that bad posture affects us?
Well, I think probably if we take it back, to the start of our careers, your career, my career, everybody was screwed up, and my old chiropractic colleague, and we talked about this on previous episodes. He taught me a lot, but one thing that he said to me that I never liked, and I still don't like it. He said, you always got to find something wrong with somebody. Even if they come in and they say they're feeling great, you got to find something wrong with them because you got to keep them coming back. But I never liked that one. So, that was our idea. Oh man, you look really, you're really, twisted today, or oh, your shoulder looks like it's really coming forward, or your head looks like it's tilted pretty far off to the side. You're a mess, right? You're screwed up, man. We got to fix that. And I think that's, kind of, at least, I don't want to say those are things that I used to do, probably to some degree, right? We all did it. Some of us still do. And I think there's still plenty of therapists that when we've talked about this, make clients, right? They make clients by telling them they're screwed up. Their neck's this way, their back's this way, they're rounded, they're this, they're curved, their pelvis is this. which all flies back to posture. But, here's the reality. You wake up one day and you're like, wait a minute, we're all asymmetrical. We're all goofy looking at the end of the day, right? I mean, we're humans, and it's a pretty weird experience being human.
Yeah, why is it that posture would cause issues in our tissues?
Yeah. Why would it be that way? But there's the other side of the coin too. Is it possible that people got into some of those positions for a reason? And maybe some of those postural changes or asymmetries are part of maybe what started some sort of effect of, immobility or perhaps pain. So I don't think we should throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak, right? I think posture can be relevant, but like everything else, it's how we start to maybe change those conversations.
Yeah, and so what we're looking at is when people come to see us in our office and they talk about how messed up they are. Oh, my
Yeah.
posture's bad. And they, we all look for something to blame, a scapegoat, because it sounds good to have a story like this is why I'm messed up. But is it always that simple? Is it always just simple to blame it on posture? Oh, I slept wrong.
I wish it was, and people always want a singular reason, right? A singular reason to why they're having the issue that they're having. So everything that you pointed out, my posture's bad. I turned the wrong way. And on one hand, it can be pretty hard to have those conversations with clients to try to explain to them that there's no singular reason for the cause of their pain, unless they've had some sort of traumatic accident or injury. But more than likely, if they had some sort of traumatic accident or injury, we hopefully wouldn't be their first go-to. But keeping with posture, so somebody comes into you and says, you know what, Ben, I've been noticing, I look at myself in the mirror and I've noticed that like my head's really leaning forward and I'm getting this little bump back here. How do you address that?
And it depends on where they're coming from too, because they get told from other places that something's wrong, be it a chiropractor or another massage therapist. How often have you had someone come in your office and say, well, so and so told me that my right toe is shorter than my left toe and it's throwing off the giddy up in my back and all of that.
It happens enough. And now you've got to try to change that conversation. And when there's too many cooks in the kitchen, right? I always say to people, my best interest is you. You're my best interest, the person in front of me. And whether it's just you and I working together or whether it's you, me, and some other type of therapist, I want us all to work together. Because ultimately, if you're saying one thing and then the other practitioner is saying another thing, the patient, the client, is left even more confused. We already know that confusion, stress, anxiety, all those sort of beliefs also are a contributing factor to pain. And at the end of the day, backing out of that and changing their mind about that I think it's important. But the approach, right, especially for a newer client, I don't want to hit them hard right away. I'll listen to them. Hey man, I've had foot pain and they told me that my one toe was going this way and my left foot is longer than the other one, or I have a longer right leg, whatever the story is, and that's kind of what I want to focus on. And that first session, I might say, okay, let's take a look at that together.
And we've talked about this in the past, how words matter and how important the words that we choose are. So then what are the words that you choose to deal with someone who, starts mentioning, oh, I've got this hump in my back and a little bit of forward head posture, and I just feel like I'm all messed up.
So I'll start opening up that can of worms with them. And I might, just start the conversation gently, like, hey, when did you start to notice that? Oh man, I just started noticing this over like the last, few months as I've been walking by the mirror and I've noticed this is starting to change a little bit. And I'll say, okay, so what does that mean to you? And, oftentimes what I'll hear is people will say, well, I don't want it to get like, I don't want more changes to happen. Can we slow that down? Can we stop it? Can we change it? Ultimately, I feel that this is a point where posture, it matters to them, right? So if it matters to them, it's going to matter to me how I approach it as well. But I'm also realistic with them. But, the realistic part is, hey, listen, you're feeling like your head's coming forward. You got this little bump forming back there. I'm not sure how much we're going to change that, but at this point, let's teach you how to kind of move it and perhaps make it stronger.
Just talking about this, I came up with a crazy idea, and I don't know that we need to go here yet, but I'm going to just throw this out there. How much does emotion play a part in posture? How much does depression or anxiety or, just a poor self-image affect our posture? And how much can we do to help that really? Because that's not really our bag. That's not in our bag of tricks.
Yeah, think about it. You're out in public with your wife. A gang of kids comes up and starts harassing her. What's your posture going to be? You're going
Yeah.
to get upright, you're going to puff your chest out, right? Your face is going to change. I'm having a bad day, right? My posture, I've actually noticed how upright I've been today because I'm just coming off this amazing weekend, right? So all those good hormones and good sleep, everything's just been flowing through my body. So I was kind of looking at myself today. I'm like, man, Nate, you just look pretty damn good today. But man, there's days, right? You're sad, and you're going to just start to slump and,
Yeah.
and everything's going to change a little bit. And people see that. So it plays a huge, huge role, huge role. Yeah, that's not necessarily our job. However, when people circle depression, stress, anxiety, especially at the first visit, I ask the question, hey, I noticed you circled depression. Are you working with anybody on that? If they say yes, I say, great. There's a lot of reasons for pain, and we're going to work as a good team for you. If they say no, I hold off on that. And maybe as we bond a little bit more and get to know them, I remind them. And hey, is that something you want to talk to somebody out about? If they say yes, great. If they say no, let it go.
Yeah, for sure.
The bucket, right? As we talk about in our seminars, right? The bucket of all this stuff coming in and how's it coming out? Our body changes, movement changes, things change. It plays a massive role. There's no denying that.
What else can we look at with posture? I brought up this story about Sally sits up straight and then Sammy slouches a lot. The next part to that story that I usually tell people is, you know what? Sally sits up straight. She has perfect ergonomic posture, but you know what? She has terrible low back pain. And you know what? Sir Sammy slouches a lot. He's got, the worst posture you can imagine, but you know what? He's got no low back pain. Why is that?
Why is that? And we all have those clients. I always reference my client that's been seeing me forever, and she's in her 70s, and she comes in. She's got a real severe scoliosis, and she's, hunched over to one side. Her head's way forward. And I'll say, how you feeling today? She says, I feel great, Nate. I was gardening all morning. I exercised all morning and went for a nice walk. She goes, I get a little every time. I get a little bit of low back pain, but I'm feeling great. And then there's a story, right? And another therapist on Facebook tells the story of, like you just told, the flight attendant, perfect upright posture, walking up and down the aisles, and the outfits that come along with that, and has severe low back pain. All right, well, sit down and slouch forward. How do you feel now? Oh, that feels so relieving. So we all have those stories, right? You mentioned earlier too, and I wanted to write off, the whole back to words, right? I did have a client years ago. We all had a client years ago, and she came in, and she probably had what I would consider the closest to what we would call perfect textbook posture that I've ever seen in my life. And she was just, yoga practitioner. And man, the way she carried herself was just very elegant. And she came into my office for a visit one day, and she walks in my treatment room and like starts crying. And I was like, I'm not equipped for that. I'm not equipped for people that cry. I'll just say that first and foremost. So, by the way, if you want to know something about Nate Fay, man, you don't want to be around me in like emergencies or emotional situations. I'm like the last person you want to be around. If the building's on fire, just leave me alone because I'll just be in the corner screaming and yelling. So, right, exactly. And I'm like, well, what's going on today? And she says, well, I just came from, we'll omit the profession for this. And she goes, she says, do I look screwed up to you? And I said, well, why are you asking? And she said, well, he told me how screwed up I was. Like we've been saying, my head's going this way, my shoulder's going. And I chuckled and I'm like, and I actually said to her, I'm like, you literally have the most perfect textbook physical being I've ever seen on anybody in my life. You know what I mean? So that whole like words play a role is just really unbelievable.
Yeah, and we've talked about this before, the nocebo effect, you know. You suggest something to someone that has no pain at all, but oh, hey, your right shoulder is up higher than the left, and it looks like you got a little bit of, I don't know, left side bending and a little bit of left rotation scoliosis, and you don't have any pain? Well, no, I never noticed that before. And now all of
Right.
a sudden, 2 weeks later, they've got pain because it was suggested that they should have pain just from a visual observation. And how important visual observations are good. They give us ideas of what we can look at and maybe optimize and help with. But is that the be all end all? Because one of my questions that I like to ask people is, yeah, your posture may look out of normal, but what can't you do? Like what is it that you can't do? And a lot of times what I hear is, well, I can do everything I want to do pain free. Well, then
Right.
what's the big deal? If you can function, what's the big deal?
And again, it's good to have those conversations. And if you give education to your clients, whatever that means, an exercise, a stretch, a strengthening, a movement, a technique, whatever is within your scope and whatever you can do, there are quote unquote, perhaps postural exercises. Listen, for the benefit of the going along with the narrative of my client, I'll teach them those things because I think that's going to also help them feel better in a certain way too.
Yeah, showering them with positivity does a lot more than telling them what's wrong.
And I think if we're too dismissive, I think, there's this whole vibe these days, and I'm back and forth with it. There's this whole vibe these days, and we talked about in the beginning where everything's taking a beating. But at the end of the day, if it matters to your client, if it's a conversation that matters to your client, and I always like to start my conversations with, listen, here's what the research is saying, but let's go with it. And here's what we can do today. So on one hand, perhaps you're not broken, but it's important to you. And let's think about it. We can still do it. And this leads me into one of our answers that we got. I was really jazzed by particularly one of the responses that we got because it comes from a gentleman named Paul Thornley. And Paul's, I think, out in Dubai or somewhere in Europe. And Paul does some interesting work when it comes to movement and cadaver dissections. And I've been following him just a little bit for the past year. And this was kind of cool that Paul responded.
Yeah.
And he says that posture analysis is a useful approach to identifying bias or rotational form and aids in recognizing inhibitory factors and often results in areas of the body that have fallen victim to linearity. In essence, there aren't bad postures, but there are simple inefficiencies in movement choices that are not appropriate for certain postural biases. And he says, when we he talks about he uses the term fascial integrity in motion, but goes on to say when we compromise it, we generally approach bodies from a biomechanical perspective. And he also goes on to say that humans have literally zero mechanical movements within them and are not meant to be symmetrical, and we're all unique. And then he finishes by saying, anyway, just shooting the breeze.
Yeah, because that's not a paragraph that I had to read it a couple times to figure
Yeah.
out what's being said there.
Yeah, I had to kind of read it too, but I think a couple key sentences are that I liked how we talked about how posture analysis is useful. If I was to highlight that part, it is useful for, I think, some of the reasons that we've already talked about, right? If it's important to our clients, it's definitely useful. And I also liked how we talked about that there's not necessarily bad postures either. Because our good friend Barb, who comments on everything, and we love her for it.
Yay,
Right.
Barb.
Yeah. And she even goes on to say that, she says that she keeps reading that posture doesn't matter, but she finds it hard to accept as well, that these things can play a role. My rounded shoulders may inhibit shoulder movement. My head forward posture may inhibit shoulder movement and may is the word, changes not for the better.
Yeah, so they may play a small role, but they may not be the starring role in what's going on.
Yeah, so maybe posture is a symptom, but not necessarily a main event.
Well, going back
Maybe.
to Paul's comments too, I really liked the word movement because I like movement more than I like posture. Because when we think of posture, we think of static and we think of this is what I am when I'm at a computer. But posture is also, like you brought up before, it's how we move through space, it's how we walk, it's how we carry ourselves. So, movement in relation to posture.
People that say, they watch people walk and move all day. And I mean, you can just dissect everything left and right. But at the end of the day, what does it all mean? I remember back in the day of, early massage school and all the talk about the Q angle. And in my head, I used to think, well, what are you going to do about it anyway? And then thank God Whitney Lowe came forward one day and said, what are you going to do about it anyway? Some of these things that were written a long time ago. Gavin brought up the Cobb angle, right? That 1948. There's old school stuff and there's new school stuff, and some things, as John Gibbons says, well, if it can still be old school and it hasn't changed too much, then that's fine too. But listen, if I'm walking funny in your mind, what are you going to do about it? I don't know.
And does it matter? I mean, as long as you're moving without pain and doing everything you want to do we have to break everything down and rebuild this person because maybe they have an anatomical leg length discrepancy that doesn't matter what you do, you're not going to fix that.
Right. And do you know this? Do you know the current statistic on that?
I don't.
Over, it's like something like I think it was either 80 or I'm going to be off on this. It's between 80 and 92% of the population has a leg length discrepancy.
And it's probably not that great. And I have worked with someone, PT actually, who had leg length discrepancy and actually had surgery in order to correct it.
Ooh.
And so it was enough to be causing issues.
Well, right. So yeah, that like something, possibly like an anatomical deformity or something like that. But if you're picking on like 2 centimeters of, then that's kind of, that was that where that statistic came out of, is non-structural, or I'm sorry, non-anatomical deformities, if you will.
Yeah.
Right. Because I've seen real life ones, 3/4 of an inch, inch and a half, those were all anatomical issues. But then everybody else is walking around with about I think it's 2 centimeters. I'll have to fact check that. Everybody.
Yeah, I'd be going along with that. That sounds about right to me. It's interesting. I want to throw out this another story. I came across a picture. I'm going to describe this picture. It's a picture of people reading the newspaper in the 1920s on the train. And
Yes.
I know you've probably seen this. I know you have. And then next to it, it shows a picture of people on their cell phones, and the head angle is the exact same. Now, I don't
Right.
know that that's a fair comparison because there probably is more usage of cell phones these days than there was reading of the newspaper in the 1920s, but it's similar. And so, can we blame posture, reading the newspaper, reading books, because I think people read books a lot more than we probably do now. Can we blame stuff like that for forward head posture? Does that matter?
Right. I think there was like a lot of capitalization, in the term tech or text. I think it was tech neck, the term that was coined. And I think there was like a little bit of a capitalization on that, in a lot of circles and on social media, and probably in like a lot of practices as well. And then, of course, the argument there is, well, did my grandfather have newspaper neck? Right.
Yeah.
And, maybe, but I mean, probably 40, 50, 60 years ago, I think there was a different understanding, right? Back then you had pain, you went to the doctor, and who knows what happened. I wasn't around for that. And now there's a lot more education, knowledge, research, right? Everything's come a long way, from rehab to therapies to how people are treated to understandings of conditions. And like you said, right, the average cell phone user, what is the average cell phone user? Is there any writings about that? The average time someone's on their cell phone per day?
I'm sure there is. I don't know it, but I'm just a wild guess. I'm going to say a lot.
I'm going to say a lot too. And I'm willing to bet without looking at it. I bet you the average is 4 to 6 hours a day. That's just flying out of my mouth, but I'm guessing that's it. So, but with that being said, because we're changing our behaviors, right, particularly the younger generation, could that be applicable? Could that potentially, right, as our kids are growing up, are they potentially going to grow into, something different? I don't know.
That's remains to be seen, but it'll be
It's
interesting. How much does it influence, and how much does just plain old movement? Because a kid that's on his phone a lot is probably going to be more sedentary than a kid that is into athletics and sports and possibly moving more. Does that play a role?
I don't know. I think like you said, I think it remains to be seen. People got standing desks, if you will. So it was we sit too much, then it became I got a standing desk. Do I sleep wrong? Do I do this wrong? And maybe at the end of the day, rather than back to that singular thing, you know, maybe it's just because you're not moving enough.
Yeah, how about that fiasco? The sit stand desk. So everybody went to standing desks, and now everybody's having low back pain because apparently nobody was used to standing that long. So now we have these desks that both, raise and lower. So now it's people are like, well, I'm sitting during the morning, I'm standing during the afternoon. It's like, well,
Right.
how about you just go walk or do a quick little stretch or something?
It's too hard, and most massage therapists like us are too nice to look at our clients and say, listen, you don't move enough, you got to stop smoking, put the bag of chips down, and the rest goes on.
Yeah. Well, how does posture affect us as massage therapists? I'll tell you a story about when I was newer to the profession and I was doing the thing. I was doing a chair massage gig, and it was for a scrapbooking group. And I was there. I committed to be there all day. I don't know if you know anything about scrapbookers, but they're an intense breed. I mean, they go after it and they are there 12, 16 hours, sometimes even all night. So anyway, I'm there and I'm doing chair massage. Well, I'm just sitting there. No one's even in my chair because no one wants to sit in the chair. And I'm thinking, what can I do to get people into my chair? And so I went and I grabbed somebody and I said, hey, my chair is empty and I need someone to sit in my chair. Will you sit in the chair and can I just work on you? I won't charge you anything. I just need someone to be in the chair. Sat him in the chair, and I looked around the room and I smiled and I looked like I was having the most fun that you could have. After I got done doing that massage, there was a line to get on that massage chair just because of how I presented my I'm going to call it my posture, my smile, my demeanor, everything. I made it look like it was going to feel so good to be in that chair.
Any young therapist that just heard that, Venmo Ben about $150 because that was a clinic right there
It
and
has
how to
nothing to do with skills. That was all acting. I had no
That's
clue what I
funny.
was doing at that point in my career, but I acted. Acting.
I love it. I absolutely love that. That was a clinic, buddy. That was a good clinic. And for free too.
I get lucky every once in a while.
At the end of the day, right, there's this vision right back to that. How our clients view us. Do you want to go to the personal trainer that looks hunched over, that maybe looks like a little overweight? I don't know. I might because it feels like more real life to me. Like shit, that's me, right?
Yeah,
So I
for
want to
sure.
train with this. I want to train with this person because my goal is to not, be a bodybuilder. So who knows? I don't know.
Where do you think the conversation on posture has changed from the past to now? We kind of touched on
Well,
that a little bit.
I think that well, I want to just kind of read like another response here and just talk about
Yeah.
it's kind of all the same, right? So I like Gavin, Gavin talks about, that there's no measurable standard, right? So that's like a good point. There's no measurable standard in what all this stuff is. And this is kind of what it comes down to. And and like another obvious thing, right, limiting ourselves to thinking like that posture is sort of the only thing, but going back to the, hey, let's consider it. So I think there lies, right, what some of our faithful responders talked about, where maybe 20 years ago, it was a main event conversation. You're screwed up, you're this way, and we better see you several times before you run into big trouble. Where I think people that are reading and following and in the know, our words are changed. We've moved into this model of like listening to our clients more, listening to what their goals are, working with them, not working against them, educating our clients that, hey, while there could be postural changes, and let's talk about that you're still moving, you're feeling great, and we're not considering it as sort of a main event thing.
One of the things that I think we often forget about is when we look at our textbooks, we have uh a chapter on muscles, we have a chapter on bones, we have a chapter on ligaments, tendons, the endocrine system, the lymph system. We have chapters on everything. We have chapters on posture, but we forget to realize that it's an entire system that works with everything. You can't just boil it down to, oh, your fascia is tight here or your posture is off here. I mean, we got to remember we're a whole person that functions as a whole and not individual pieces.
And it all sounds good on paper, right? It really does. At the end of the day, that all the stuff sounds nice when it's wrapped up with a nice little bow. But at the same time, man, it's a lot. It's harder than that, right? So kudos to the practitioners that are, thinking about this a little bit differently. But like we said, right? Don't throw it out completely. Not at all. I don't think we should throw any of these ideas out.
No, I mean, allow yourself to be open to the possibility that things may change. But and we've talked about this before, the story changes, but a lot of stuff that we do hasn't changed. We're still doing the things. We just have a
Absolutely.
different story to justify the stuff we do.
I would, if there's one thing that I would really like to change, and I don't know about if you see or hear about a lot of this in your neck of the woods, but I still do see a lot of practitioners that are taking x-rays of people's necks or low back just for the sole purpose to point out these asymmetries to make them a patient. And it's backing into what you said earlier, the people that are coming back to your office and saying, hey, I was told this. And that's the part that I think we need to make that go away completely. But Ben, I'm just one man and you're just one man.
But you know what, Nate? I heard that, in order to change the world, you need to start with yourself.
Well, I did. So I stopped doing all that stuff a long time
So
ago.
Nate and I have changed ourselves, and we're just putting it out there in the universe. Anyone else that wants to follow along, accept the possibility of new thinkings about posture, feel free.
Feel free.
What do you think, Nate? We've talked about a lot of stuff. Do you want to talk about some takeaways?
I do. What do we take away? I think that we took away that postures can definitely be a part of this thing, right? And I think that I like the idea if a client comes to us and talks about how they feel like they've changed, to be open to that conversation, educate them, but don't over educate them, and listen to them and work with them on, what their thoughts and their beliefs are in that moment, but also give them confidence that they're not broken.
Yeah, I like that. And I like what you said earlier is not to dismiss, and not to dismiss what they feel and how they want to talk about their postural distortions because it's real. If someone tells you that they have pain, we have no choice but to believe them because how else are we going to treat them? So when someone believes that their posture is off, we can't just dismiss it and say, "Oh no, you have great posture. It's fine." Whatever that chiropractor, that PT said, they were crazy. I mean, I think it's important to address the issues, but then also, like you said, educate and see what we can do. And can this is a question went through my head. And how much can we really fix posture with manual therapy? I mean, it's a piece of it, but then again, how much is it? How much is it tied to emotions, and how much is it tied to other things that we play a small part in what we can do to change things?
I guess 5 to 8 years ago, when I started learning about all this stuff, everything that we sort of like to talk about here, And there was that moment of it was kind of like scary. I felt like, our whole world was changing. But, I'm kind of like coming around to like, listen, you don't have to be black and white on everything. It felt cool for a minute to be like, oh, listen to what I know now. But then at the same time, I'm just like, I don't want to say big whoop, but at the end of the day, man, when you're in the trenches, when you're in your, as I call it, my 12 by 12, that's where stuff really matters and what your clients need and what they want.
If they walk out of that room and having their expectations met, maybe feeling a little bit better, maybe a little bit worse, but if you're meeting expectations and like you said, being in the trenches, man, that's what we do. We're not going to have a win every time.
Once in a while, I'll see therapists post like before and after pictures, right? And I'm like, man, that's like really cool. But like, can you replicate that across the board, right? Show me every client. Show me all 30 clients that you saw that week times the whole month, and show me that across the board.
So I think posture is pretty big discussion that we've had today.
I think it's going to be, and I think when we release this episode, we're probably going to get a lot of fan mail.
I'm getting flooded with fan mail, to be honest. I don't know about you.
Yeah. So if you're listening to this, chill out.
I tell you what, take your comments to Ben and Nate's questions we ask on the internet, our Facebook page. We also both have Instagram accounts where you can connect with us there. But you know what? Say somebody wants to listen to us on, some kind of platform, audio platform. Where would you tell them to go, Nate?
They can listen to us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify.
That's fantastic. We're coming up on episode 20, and we're doing this cool thing for episode 20. You want to talk a little bit about that, Nate?
So here's the deal. Episode 20, which is going to come up in probably 2 or 3 short weeks. It's going to be our silver anniversary of the show. And we've had a few special guests on to date. We had
Eric Stevenson was most recent. We had Trisha Gilbert.
Yeah. And we had
Jeremy,
our good friend Jeremy from California.
And we had
Michelle.
So we had Michelle,
Jeremy, Trisha, Eric Stevenson. We're going to have our good friend, the massage mentor, on an upcoming episode 19.
I met the massage mentor down in Oklahoma City. And I tell you what, I'm such a fan that I got all I couldn't talk. It was so cool to be able to meet her.
Well, I think when we have Diane on, that's going to be a continuation, almost our first part 2 episode where we're going to talk about prices and employees.
Yeah.
We're going to have the mentor on to talk about her thriving, amazing business outside of Philadelphia. But here's the deal, man. Back to this, episode 20. We're going to have the special guest on our show. And you know who that special guest is, Ben? It's going to be you, the listener and viewer. So everybody is going to be a special guest on episode 20.
That's right. I forgot about that. We're going to throw out a link, and anyone that wants to join in the conversation, you're going to be on Zoom with us, and you're going to be able to interact with us live. And then we're going to throw it into a podcast episode so that everybody can re-listen to it.
That's right. And the question that week is going to be, what do you love about massage? What do you love most about being a massage therapist?
Such a simple question, but so deep.
Hey, thanks for tuning in, everybody, to episode 18, and we will look forward to seeing you on the internet.